Hi, BookTube, and welcome to a non-fiction review. While we were on holiday in September, I needed an electronic non-fiction book that would be, well, not too straining, perhaps a little entertaining even, because I was going to be picking it up and putting it down a lot, snatching little reads while I was riding on a train or waiting for a train or waiting for a tram or riding on a tram or sitting in a cafeteria while we waited for a tram that was much later, all that sort of thing, or just for some relaxation at the end of a busy day. Therefore, the non-fiction book that I chose, which turned out to be just ideal, I think would also be ideal for the kind of readership that doesn't normally go in for non-fiction. And of course it helps if the subject matter is the world's most popular fiction writer in English. This is the biography of Agatha Christie, written by Lucy Worsley, and that came out in the year 2022. 498 pages, but only 389 of those are text. So you can see it's full of resources, which we will look at a little bit later. Prices are pretty good. Kindle right now in the UK is only $5.99, and in the US only $6.70. That's a very cheap ebook. From what I understand, it's hard to get them much cheaper than that in the US, but print copies are reasonable prices as well. And I did find lots of secondhand copies. You'll see the cheapest I found there, £3.61, including delivery. That's quite a bargain. Now, mine was a Kindle ebook, and as it happens, because I bought it back in October 2023 in anticipation of being a year without buying books, I bought it, and it was a Kindle daily deal, which in the UK means I got it for 99 pence, so less than £1. Let's meet Lucy Worsley. She's probably familiar to a lot of UK readers because she's made so many television appearances. She was born in 1973. She went to New College, Oxford, and got her degree in ancient and modern history. And then she began her career as a curator and an inspector of various historical properties, which culminated in her being the chief curator of the historic royal palaces. And from there, I guess she just got nabbed by the BBC to begin to narrate television series, and she has hosted a number of documentaries on historical subjects, as well as writing other books on English history. If you want to check out her website, it will be in my description box, and it includes an Amazon link to all her published works, and they're all highly approachable works about English social history or biography. And a quick look at the structure here. We start out with a very short preface from Lucy, I think, to just give us a taster of what kind of writing she's going to do in the book, because she has got very attractive writing, and I'll try to show you that by reading an extract. Lucy Worsley's experience as a curator and a television presenter, that's equipped her with an amazing ability to engage with people face to face. If you read more academic nonfiction, I could see you arguing, well, could this biography have been more thorough? Could it have been longer, thicker? Yes, possibly. I imagine Worsley is fully qualified and capable of writing that kind of book, but it would have had a smaller reading audience. And that seems a shame, because the topic is Agatha Christie, and her works have sold in billions of copies. They've been translated into 100 different languages. And so surely her biography, if at all possible, should be far-reaching. It should have mass appeal while still giving us enough facts to feel that we are reading a good biography. I appreciated how short the chapters were. They did allow you to get just, if you were busy picking up a book and putting it down, 9 pages per chapter on average means you can probably finish a chapter in whatever sitting that you have, which was fantastic. Also, there were a lot of photographs throughout the book that take you through Christie's life from being a tiny little girl in a frilly little Victorian dress to a woman in her 80s. And those were fantastic photographs. Also, there is a list of all the archival sources that Lucy Worsley used, the British Museum, the Christie Archive Trust, those various organizations that she used to get her information. And to go into the structure further, there's so many things you could say, but one point that struck me as I was reading this biography is that Christie was the product of an aristocratic English Victorian background. So she grew up as one of those young women who could expect when they reached a certain age to become a society debutante and to come out. Christie came out in Egypt, as it happens. Now that's very odd, but apparently if well-to-do families were in a bit of a pinch financially and they needed a way to save money, it helped to take your daughters out to Cairo, where there was a flourishing expat society of wealthy people, and that your young daughter could still meet a lot of eligible young men, and she could become introduced to society that way, and it cost you a lot less money, apparently. But Christie says of herself that it never occurred to her that she was going to be a writer. It never came into her head when she was growing up. She didn't have that ambition as such. And I thought that was interesting because when she did start her first novel, she wasn't 20, she wasn't yet married, she had a lot of free time. And her first book was actually called Snow Upon the Desert. It wasn't a detective novel, and she couldn't get publishers to accept it. She struggled. She sent it off to various places, but it didn't quite, nobody picked it up. Now, Worsley happens to mention in passing that there was another virtually unknown novelist to us now, not then, a woman named Ethel Carney, and she was also known as Ethel Carney Holdsworth. And she started writing around the same time as Agatha did, and she sold really well. And I read somewhere that she actually outsold H.G. Wells at the time he was writing, and she qualifies, so Lucy thinks, as the first working class woman writer. Now, I can't help thinking now of Rebecca Romney and her book about Jane Austen's bookshelf, about the number of writers who just drift out of our awareness so quickly, and those that last, and wondering if it has anything to do with socioeconomic status. That is, because Ethel didn't start out as a woman of means, the fact that she became a woman of means, that didn't help her. I don't know. I need to read her books, and then I'll give you some more thoughts on that subject. What made Christie a crime novelist, I think, was her experiences during the First World War. When she did stay in England, by the way, she didn't leave and go to France, where she might have seen some absolute horrors, but nevertheless, she was nursing in Dorset, and they received a number of soldiers coming across the Channel who were wounded to nurse. So she went from having this very sheltered, lovely Victorian life where nothing of any great drama happened to her, and suddenly she was seeing limbs being sawn off or men dying in agony, highly disfigured. As we know, some of the injuries were horrific during that war, and it changed her. In addition, she also, when she was able, managed to get herself out of nursing it on the wards, and instead she worked for the pharmacist in that hospital. So she trained herself then and became very, very knowledgeable in poisons and correct dosages of medications, and what dosage of something that was good could become something bad. Now, it shows Lucy Worsley's ability to structure the book as to how she introduces these facts. Having talked about Christie's war work and how her fiancé was overseas fighting and he was never sending her as many letters as Agatha wanted, which would be very engaging material in a novel, Worsley pauses to tell us how many of Christie's novels used poison as their murder weapon. So she interrupts the biography itself at salient points to go, just a second, yes, I've told you she's learned to be a pharmacist. Now I could go on and tell you the rest of her war story, but I'd just like to show you how being exposed to that at the age that she was, gaining that expertise, became very helpful in Christie's later novels, because she did have a lot of novels where the victims, their lives were ended by poison. Now, her second novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, her first crime novel, that was also turned down by publishers until Christie was contacted by an eminent publisher, John Lane. And obviously he'd heard of her. Maybe he'd seen one of her previous submissions. I don't know. But he got together with her and said he wanted to talk to her about helping her career. Now, problem. When he met with her, I think it was probably quite clear to him that Christie knew nothing of business. A young Victorian lady of her class would not be expected to sully herself in business, and so the contract that he drew up for her first few novels shortchanged her a great deal. However, her career went into such high gear that in a way it didn't really matter. My favourite part, though, of this biography was Lucy Worsley's coverage of the year 1926. That was the year Agatha Christie mysteriously disappeared and wasn't found for about 2 weeks. And what I like is the attention that Worsley gives to this episode, because there is a popular myth in circulation, because Christie was quite famous already by that time, that she planned her disappearance, that it was a publicity stunt to get more attention. It's a tempting myth to believe. I mean, we're talking about the queen of detective fiction. So what would make a better publicity stunt than to make yourself disappear and ask the general public to try and track you down? And maybe I can go into a little rabbit hole here just to, I guess, round out that one chapter, because it really mattered to me. I was interested in how much detail Worsley brought that gives you context for this year. So, what was happening in Agatha's life in the weeks that led up to her disappearance in 1926? Well, first of all, she'd moved house. From being in London, she moved south to a rural location in Surrey, which really, it suited her husband's golfing hobby, but it left Agatha socially isolated, because in the 1920s, a married woman, to meet other people of her class, there was a way of being introduced and slowly bringing yourself into your society. You couldn't just go and call on people. And because her husband was always busy in London working during the week, and at weekends he played golf, he didn't take her out. He didn't get her circulating in the society where they had moved to. And so it left her without any friends that she could call on. So she was quite alone. She also lost her mother. Now, given that she was only in her early 30s and her mother and she had a very close relationship, there was also a problem that Agatha was not able to make it to her mother's bedside before she passed away. So that left Agatha with the grief to contend with while her husband was absent so much and she was alone so much. Also, her husband, Archie, yes, he was spending more and more time away from home. He actually spent even more time away when Agatha's mother died, because he just, his war experience had left him with, I think, some consequences of the trauma, such that he just really couldn't deal with anyone being stressed or de-stressed. And so it even says in the biography, he had a violent dislike of illness, death, and trouble. Understandable, really, for someone who had served in the Great War not many years before. You also have a problem that Agatha and her older sister Madge were having to look after their brother Monty, who, as a result of his injuries during the war, had developed a morphine addiction, which he could afford just, but he was gradually outspending himself and getting himself into difficulties because of violent or unpredictable behavior in public. His sisters were trying to protect their mother from that stress while their mother was ill, so they were often having to get him out of scrapes, pay for things, and so on. And so that was a source of stress. Now, she had published 6 complete novels by this time, and the workload involved in handling correspondence and getting on with her next novel meant that she needed a full-time personal assistant. As it happens, that assistant, her father, fell ill, and she had to take a prolonged leave of absence in the weeks leading up to Christie's disappearance. So suddenly, no help from an assistant either. And it was at this time that Christie began to suffer from insomnia and went to the doctor and got a prescription for some tablets to help her sleep. That in itself should have been a warning sign. This woman is under a great deal of stress. And she was famous enough for rumors about this mental illness to get out into the papers around about August 1926. And bear in mind, there weren't celebrities in those days, not to the same degree now. So no one would have coached her through how do you handle the fact that your private life is now very public. And then let's add the straw that breaks the camel's back. In the days before her disappearance, Agatha's husband Archie confessed that he was having an affair and that he wanted their marriage to end so that he could marry his lover, Nancy. Now, once Lucy Worsley had laid all this out for us in detail. To my mind, it's strong enough evidence to suggest that when Christie disappeared in December of 1926, she really wouldn't have been in a state of mind such that she could mastermind a publicity stunt. This was a woman who probably had a mental breakdown and did lose her memory. And Worsley talks to experts in the subject who could bring their opinion as to whether the memory loss that Christie seems to have suffered during her disappearance, whether that was plausible or no. And before we close this review, I'd just like to read a short extract from the Kindle ebook. This is from page 68 and 69. To give you a sense of how readable it is, but also how Lucy Worsley does not write like one of those academic biography writers that might put you off if you don't read nonfiction a lot, but you're interested in Agatha Christie and you wouldn't mind a biography. I'm hoping that what this passage will show you is that Lucy Worsley is very approachable and friendly, almost chatty, if I can use that UK term. Here's the passage. Let's see what you think. Agatha eventually made the decision, fateful for her future, to leave the wards, to train to work instead in the hospital pharmacy. This had interesting challenges and better hours. I mastered the simpler facts, she wrote, of her new job, and after we had blown up our Kona coffee machine in the process of practicing Marsh's test for arsenic, our progress was well on the way. She also had to deal with creepy co-workers. A commercial chemist in Torquay gave her some extra coaching, but Mr. P, as Agatha names him, mistakenly mixed a set of suppositories with a highly dangerous drug. It was unthinkable to mention his error, but neither could she let the suppositories be used, so she knocked them onto the floor and trod on them. "That's all right, little girl," he said. "Don't worry too much," and patted me tenderly on the shoulders. He was too much given to that kind of thing, Christie says. Ugh. And literally, Lucy Worsley uses the word ugh. And I love how it interrupts the text. And immediately I thought, oh, this is such a different biography. It's almost like Lucy Worsley and me sitting down for a cup of coffee, and she just brain dumps on me the story of Agatha Christie as she knows it, being able, of course, to bring in all these wonderful quotes from Christie's journals and correspondence, etc. And that's the review done. Fairly quick, I would say, but then this is a sort of book which there isn't much more I need to say, except if you are interested in Agatha Christie and you've always thought, oh, a biography there would be nice. I think this is a highly readable, as I say, very good if you have to pick it up and put it down a lot. In fact, I think Lucy Worsley was anticipating that people would need to do that. I think that's why her chapters are short. Her paragraphs also tend to be a little on the shorter side. And I just love the detail that she brings because it's clear how much she loved her subject matter. So I think if you love Agatha Christie, you'll like the way she handles this biography. So thanks everybody for tuning in to this review. There will be another one in a few days' time. Probably that's going to come out on Saturday because you see by the pin, Sunday will be Remembrance Sunday, and I don't really want to be editing and messing about and on that day. I like to watch the cenotaph service and that sort of thing. So see you again at the weekend, everybody. Good luck with your reading in the meantime. Take care. Bye-bye.